Hello everyone, so I'm going to carry on with Boy by Roald Dahl today and finish off the final section of the starting point. So this talks about Roald Dahl's experience at kindergarten, which is like our nursery first experience of school. So this is set, it tells us of a time between 1922 and 1923 when he was aged 6 and 7. So, in 1920, when I was still only 3, my mother's eldest child, my own sister Astrid, died of appendicitis. She was 7 years old when she died, which was also the age of my eldest daughter Olivia when she died from measles 42 years later. Astrid was far and away my father's favourite. He adored her beyond measure, and her sudden death left him quite literally speechless for days afterwards. He was so overwhelmed with grief that when he himself went down with pneumonia a month or so afterwards, he did not much care if he lived or died. If they had penicillin in those days, neither appendicitis nor pneumonia would have been so much of a threat. But no penicillin or any other magical antibiotic cures. Pneumonia in particular was a very dangerous illness indeed. The pneumonia patient on about 4th or 5th day would invariably reach what's known as the crisis. The temperature soared and the pulse became rapid. The patient had to fight to survive. My father refused to fight. He was thinking, I am quite sure, of his beloved daughter, and he was wanting to join her in heaven. So he died. He was 57 years old. My mother had now lost a daughter and a husband all in the space of a few weeks. Heaven knows what it must have felt like to be hit with a double catastrophe like this. Here she was, a young Norwegian in a foreign land, suddenly having to face all alone the very gravest problems and responsibilities. She had 5 children to look after, 3 of her own and 2 by her husband's first wife. And to make matters worse, she herself was expecting another baby in 2 months' time. A less courageous woman would have most certainly have sold the house and packed her bags and headed straight back to Norway with her children. Over there, in her own country, she had her mother and her father willing and waiting to help, as well as her 2 unmarried sisters. But she refused to take the easy way out. Her husband has always stated most emphatically that he wished all his children to be educated in English schools. They were the best in the world, he used to say. Better by far than the Norwegian ones. Better even than the Welsh ones, despite the fact he lived in Wales and had his business there. He maintained that there was some kind of magic about English schooling, and that the education it provided had caused the inhabitants of the small island to become a great nation and a great empire, and to produce the world's greatest literature. No child of mine, he kept saying, is going to school anywhere else but in England. My mother was determined to carry out the wishes of her dead husband. To accomplish this, she would have to move house from Wales to England, but she wasn't ready for that yet. She must stay here in Wales for a while longer, where she knew people who could help and advise her, especially her husband's great friend and partner, Mr. Addison. But even if she wasn't leaving Wales quite yet, it was essential that she moved to a smaller, more manageable house. She had enough children to look after without having to bother about some farm as well. So as soon as her 5th child, another daughter, was born, she sold the big house and moved to a smaller one a few miles away in Llandaff. It was called Cumberland Lodge and was nothing more than a pleasant, medium-sized suburban villa. So it was in Llandaff 2 years later, when I was 6 years old, that I went to my first school. The school was a kindergarten run by 2 sisters, Mrs. Caulfield and Miss Tucker. and it was called Elm Tree House. It is astonishing how little one remembers about one's life before the age of 7 or 8. I can tell you all sorts of things that happened to me from 8 onwards, but only very few that happened before. I went for a whole year to Elmtree, but I cannot even remember what my classroom looked like, nor can I picture the faces of Mrs. Caulfield or Miss Tucker, although I am sure they were very sweet and smiling. I do have a blurred memory of sitting on the stairs and trying over and over to tie one of my shoelaces, but that is all that comes back to me at this distance of school itself. On the other hand, I can remember very clearly the journeys I made to and from the school because they were so tremendously exciting. Great excitement is probably the only thing that really interests a 6-year-old boy, and it sticks in his mind. In my case, the excitement centred around my new tricycle. I rode to school on it every day with my eldest sister riding hers. No grown-ups came with us, and I can remember, oh so vividly, how the two of us used to go racing at enormous tricycle speeds down the middle of the road, and then, most glorious of all, when we came to a corner, we would lean to one side and take it on 2 wheels. All of this, you must realise, was good in the days when the sight of a motor car on the street was an event, and it was quite safe for tiny children to go tricycling and whooping their way to school in the centre of the highway. So much, then, from the memories of kindergarten 62 years ago. It's not much, but it's all there is left. And there's Roald on his tricycle. Okay, so we finished the starting point now. Our next chapter is about his school, so Llandaff Cathedral School, and it's from 1923 to 1925, so between the ages of 7 and 9. So I hope you will join me for that chapter next time. Bye.